The importance of this chapter, piece interactions, is to get you in the right mindset when you think about the right way to describe how all of the pieces basically see each other and empty squares. So what I mean by that is, on a chessboard, there are obviously a lot of physical standing pieces. Pawns, bishop, knight, queen, rook, king. But there's also a lot of empty space. Now, as a beginner, it's difficult to balance all of this, but that's kind of why I made this chapter as an aside before we jump into like real, seriously theoretical stuff like openings and middle games. Look at the position in front of you. First thing you should do as a beginner, like in a position like this, try to draw little arrows from each piece in the directions that they see. For example, let's start with the white pieces. So this bishop sees all the way down here. The queen sees this, and this, and this, and even backwards. The rook, for example, only sees this direction. The knight is the hardest one. It sees these squares. It also defends the pawn and this pawn. Just, it can't go there because there's something already there. And things like that. The thing with pawns is that pawns see diagonally. They actually do. They just can't move there, but they do have diagonal vision because if, for example, black were to push the pawn, suddenly, oh, sorry, wrong arrow. Suddenly our pawn would be able to capture, as you learned in the basics chapter. So be thinking about the position like this. And in a position like this, we're also going to learn about when something is genuinely under attack versus when it should, it's not, or when it should be captured versus when it shouldn't be captured, and things like that. So, for example, this queen is not attacking this pawn because that would just be taken. That's just a bad trade. You have vision of the pawn. That's how I want you to think about it. Same with this. You have vision of the pawn, but that doesn't mean that you're going to take it because it's defended, right? It's defended. That's another thing that we're trying to learn here, attacking and defending. Certain squares can be defended. For example, you can't put your bishop on that square because it's defended. If you put your bishop on that square, I will take the bishop. But you can put your rook on this square, attacking the queen, because the rook is protected, not just by the knight, but also by the queen. So rook here is a great move. Like, that would be a perfectly reasonable move. Try to pause if you want. Find two other ways that white can create a threat, a physical threat on the black pieces. One of them. You can pause if you'd like. I'll give you a few seconds. I'm going to tell you the answer now. Knight b5 is another way. That attacks the queen. It also has vision on two other pawns. You might not take them. And the other way is bishop to h6, which would attack the rook. And of course, you want to trade 3 for 5. That's a good deal. The problem in chess is that all of these one-move attacks oftentimes can be parried. And I don't want you to get into the mindset of, I need to make one-move threats all the time, because that's the only way that I can win a game of chess. No. But I want you to be thinking about, that's how I should play. And the way I don't want you to be thinking about is, well, I'm going to go here and maybe they won't see it. No. I mean, this is a completely safe move, and as long as you're not just giving away material, I'm completely happy with that. If it's black's move, you can see that the bishop sees the pawn, and who's behind it? The queen. That's called a pin. You will learn about that in the tactics chapter, but the pawn is pinned and cannot take, because if it were to move, the bishop would take the queen, right? So then you can play a move like f5. That's what we're going to teach you to do in a course like this, to see what's behind certain pieces, what things are available to you depending on how your opponent is setting up. So things like that. For example, this knight has nothing guarding it. I want you to be able to recognize that. Neither does this pawn. So a move like queen c6, which puts pressure on the knight and the pawn behind it, okay? And teams up with the bishop. That's called a battery, when a queen and a bishop, or a queen and a rook, or any two pieces stand together on the same kind of straightaway, horizontal, or diagonal. This is also a battery over here. So a move like queen c6 versus a move like queen b4. which also attacks the knight and the pawn, and tries to maybe get in here. And if the queen gets in here, it's attacking the rook and has vision on the 2 pawns, like that. There are a million different ways to understand how piece interactions work, but I wanted to put an introductory little video on it to get you thinking about it. To not say that a fair trade would mean you're attacking something. A fair trade is not an attack on a piece. I'll give you an example. This is not an attack. The queen d1 does not attack the queen. That's a trade. Okay, because if you were going to lose whatever it is, even for fair value, that's not an attacking move because you're not threatening to create like a legitimate threat on your opponent. That's just a trade. You're offering an exchange of pieces. You're offering a trade. So try to get thinking about that creating a threat really means you win something. You're getting something, okay? And try to use that throughout this course. Try to catch yourself when you're saying, oh, I'm creating a threat. Wait, really? Am I? Am I sure? And so on. That's kind of like a good starting point. And the last thing that I wanted to cover in this chapter was check and checkmate, really. So if we go to a full board, I had a game up here that I was going to go through, but we can even start at the very beginning. Check and checkmate. So a check in chess, let's say we go here as like the fastest possible check that we can have. A check is an attack on the king, and it pauses you and makes you react. You have to guard your king. There are 3 ways to get out of a check. There are also 3 ways to get out of just danger in general, and those ways are move the piece. Move the piece that's in danger. In this case, you can't move the king, because if the king goes there, you get taken. That doesn't work. That literally won't. See? Doesn't let me. The second way is block the attack. In the case of a bishop, which is a long-range piece, you have to block the check. You can block with the bishop or the knight on either of these 2 squares, because the knight is protected. Right? We learned that earlier in this video. Bishop here is protected. That's a fair trade. Are you attacking that bishop? Kind of, because that would be a free capture, but of course, it's not really an attack, because a bishop doesn't attack a bishop. That doesn't make any sense. A bishop can take a bishop, right? So you would get 3 for 3, but that's still a fine move. And the last way to get out of danger at all times is, well, you can take what's attacking you, but that's not, no one can capture this, right? You can't, if this pawn was here, maybe, but, so that's what a check is, all right? And that's a few ways to get out of a check. A checkmate, and I will show you the fastest checkmate possible. Don't play like this, but this is known as the 2-move checkmate, or I believe the fool's mate. The 2-move checkmate happens like this, and it's a check you cannot escape from. So you can't block, you can't take, you can't move your king. It's checkmate. Now, of course, you're not going to ever get this with white. Maybe you'll get it with black. But checkmate can happen as early as move 2 and as late as move 150. It can happen way later in the game, which we'll learn about in the endgame section. It can happen in the middle. Ideally, you get a checkmate in the middle game, which you probably will. On average, you'll probably get checkmate around move 20 to 25. That's it. I mean, checkmate is checkmate. That is the ultimate goal of the game. The last thing that I want to show you is something called stalemate. Stalemate is a little bit weird, and I'll give you the most basic example of it. Sometimes it happens in a position like this. If it were black's move here, black is in stalemate, not checkmate. Why? Because stalemate is when you have no legal moves, but no one is threatening your king. Like, the queen has surrounded the king's legal movements, but the queen's not attacking the king. Queen's not a knight. If the queen was a knight, it would be attacking the king, but it's not. So this is a stalemate. If it's black's move, if it's white's move, you give a check, ideally, or you move away and you give the king some breathing room. You'll get this. I mean, this will happen. This will happen with king and queen, and hopefully in the endgames chapter you review and it never happens. I mean, it can also happen in positions that are much harder seemingly to obtain. For example, here I'll just give you, literally we'll just create an example for you. this position is also stalemate if it's black's move. Because black doesn't have any legal moves. Black has pawns. He doesn't just have a king left. Well, they can't move. Nothing can move. Because both these moves are covered and black's king is not in any danger. So you want to avoid this if you are winning by a lot. You want to make sure you are creating threats, actual physical threats on the king. And if you're on the defensive side, this is why you never surrender. Just play till mate. Especially as a beginner. It's good practice to play until mate. So that's all the different piece interactions. Check and checkmate and stalemate. You kind of have the whole tool, the whole toolbox now. Now we give you the instructional kit to assemble the furniture.